Hello, and welcome along to Susty Talk. This is a brand new series put together by Edie to keep sustainability and energy professionals talking, feeling connected, optimistic, sane through this quite sort of incredible situation of coronavirus and lockdown here in the UK. I'm Edie's content director, Luke Nicholls, broadcasting live from this makeshift interview studio, otherwise known as my living room. So apologies in advance if any cats jump in the way or my neighbour next door is heard who's sort of mowing her lawn once again. These are the delights, I suppose, of working from home, and I'm sure many of you tuning into this are in similar circumstances, which actually leads me on to my first and most important point I wanted to make to everyone tuning in. So speaking on behalf of the whole ED team, we hope you're all keeping safe and well, and that you've been able to settle into this sort of new way of working, and indeed a new way of life, which we're all faced with over the coming weeks and months. And that's where Susty Talk comes in, because we want to keep sustainability going through this turbulent period and beyond. We're going to be hearing from a spread of sustainability and energy leaders across the world to help us do that via these 15, 20-minute conversations on Microsoft Teams. And we could think of no one better to help us kick off the series than Mr. Jon Khoo, who is the Regional Sustainability Manager at the global carpet tile manufacturer Interface. And Jon is joining us, of course, from his own home. It's not 4:12 in the morning, don't be alarmed. I guess that's a 24-hour clock behind him. Whereabouts in the country are you connecting from, Jon?
Joining you from southeast London. Well, it looks very, very sunny outside.
Yes, yeah, no, it's very sunny. Yeah, we're also in the southeast. Talk us through then what lockdown life is like for you and the rest of the team there at Interface. How are you kind of keeping sustainability going and keeping sane?
Yeah, for us, as a first point from the Interface family, we hope you're staying safe and staying well too in what is a tricky and difficult time. For us, I mean, I work at home quite a lot already, but this is kind of taking it to the max. It's funny, someone said to me, "What's your advice? You work at home a lot. What would you say you should do?" And my usual advice is make sure you get out and see people and catch up with your local community. Not so good for the keeping social distance and the isolation life. So can't really run that one as an idea. But it's lockdown life is okay. I think it's for us as a company, business continuity, keeping going, working out what we can do to move forward, and also trying to find our way in what is tricky and uncertain times, because I look to 5 o'clock every day to find out what's happening again in the UK, and I can't really predict how things are going to be on Saturday or Monday, let alone 2 weeks or 2 months. So we're all in the same boat, I guess.
So how many are in your sort of direct team that you would ordinarily communicate with day to day, and are you still communicating with them, I guess, via things like this?
For mine, it's still the same. I think if anything, some of them are working more at home, so I can catch them more frequently. So we've actually been doing some training on sustainability with Interface for the last couple of weeks, which has been a nice thing. So if anything, rather than seeing me less, they've seen more of me. But I'll let them write the reviews on that.
Yeah, okay. The training, how is that being delivered then? Via software like this, or?
Yeah, I think in terms of whether it's Microsoft Teams or other video conferencing, it's I guess it's never quite the same as seeing people, but it's something of a bit of a virtual connection revolution that we're seeing, whether through this or the controversial Zoom or which other format you use. I think people are being very creative in terms of being able to reach out, and we found that to be very, very useful. So it's nice. I also think in terms of meetings, you were talking about your cats earlier, and another nice thing is I think in virtual meetings, I've had a great chance to meet other people's kids, their pets, their partners, all kinds of things, and it's a more personal connection. So maybe that's one of the benefits of the last couple of weeks, has been a chance to see into the lives of my colleagues, for them to see into my life in a bit of a different way. It's a bit of one of those silver linings to what is otherwise quite a big cloud.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, on that communications point, how do you see the current situation impacting kind of the communication of sustainability and kind of behavioural change around energy and sustainability, which of course can't stop? But are you finding that with your own work, it is a struggle to still communicate sustainability to your employees? Or
I think whether internally or externally, I mean, in pretty much every speech that I give on sustainability or training session, I talk about the biggest challenge that we face as humanity being climate change. I've had to rewrite that slightly and say there were two challenges that humanity faces in terms of COVID-19 and climate change. And I think, very much in the short term, COVID-19 is very much the acute challenge, but we cannot forget what we need to be doing on that challenge that hasn't gone away, but is still as big and scary as it was before in terms of climate change and taking the actions we need to turn things around in the next 8 to 10 years.
So on this point, Edie put out a survey recently on our audience, just simply asking them, how is coronavirus impacting you and your work? And there were some, I suppose, interesting findings. They perhaps confirmed some of the kind of the hunches that we did have, which is that it was going to restrict, spend, for example, on sustainability and energy initiatives at the moment, or sort of postpone announcements. I think more than half, in fact, said that sustainability announcements had been sort of postponed or put back because of the current situation. I think a third had said their spending on sustainability and energy projects had been directly impacted. I mean, what advice would you have then for this is a million-dollar question for a sustainability professional working in an organisation where they're just simply finding that they are coming up against a bit of a coronavirus wall in terms of kind of communicating things? How should they be relating the two? Should they be just trying to find opportunities to weave it into conversations? Or
I think you have to step back and kind of pivot your plan, because your plan that you had for 2020 up until February or March is not going to work now. You're going to have to think about a new way of doing it. Now, for us, there's no change on spending. We probably will see some innovations, maybe delayed a little bit. But fundamentally, we still need to be making that change where we can. But one of the smart things we found to do is to step back and think about, all right, if we're not going to be communicating things so much a little bit, what can we do strategically in the background and with the training and with other things internally to move us on? So how can we move forward? So when we are back to launching new innovations or new approaches or a new program or some form of new development, depending what you do, your product or service, you're ready to go and you can really make the most of when things are better. And they will get better eventually, but you need to do your planning now and do some of the work now to get there. Now, I appreciate that is more difficult depending on your team situation, because you might have employees that are furloughed, you might have employees that you've got relatives who are ill at the moment, and I think there's a certain need to be agile and flexible around that. But I think there's a good opportunity to do a lot of the stuff behind the scenes to get you ready for better days.
Okay. Do you see a link between climate change, tackling climate change, and the kind of the fallouts of what we're seeing with coronavirus and the way that's being responded to and tackled by governments and by businesses?
I do see a link. I think they're both global critical challenges, and I think on the positive side, it's been really interesting to see how unifying COVID-19 has been across communities, even between kind of in the realm of politics and different political parties. People are really coming together, and they've also been very creative in kind of some of the solutions that they're coming up with. If we could do the same with climate change, like we could really move things much further forward and really quickly. The speed of decision making and the speed of willingness to make bold decisions for the benefit of communities, if I take the UK as an example, as we live here, has been staggering. And if we could get even half of that into the climate change debate, we'd move faster. And it comes with a word of warning though, because I think I do worry sometimes when I look at the social posts, like any attempt to market sustainability off the back of COVID-19, I stay really clear of, because I think it's too soon, it's too raw. And so I think there's got a little bit of care and a bit of sensitivity that needs to be there as well. But overall, there is a link between the two. There's been a couple of articles out recently that have drawn the parallels. So it's an interesting area to be thinking about.
Okay, and drawing those parallels, I think there's I know that you're a big fan of single-use plastic chat, based on, you used to hold the role of innovation or innovation partner there in Interface, and have done a lot of work over the years on sort of reducing plastics in your organization and through the supply chain. There's a lot I'm kind of seeing coming out now connecting coronavirus with plastics, some of it not positive. The latest I was just looking at, I won't call it up now in case this crashes the system in some way, but there was a story about a number of parts of America that are sort of reversing some of their bans on some single-use plastics because the alternatives potentially could be more open or susceptible to carrying kind of coronavirus on them. Obviously, US is one of the first to have responded in that way, I suppose. But what's your view on the connection between the current pandemic and sort of single-use plastics? And is there a connection there?
I mean, there is a connection if we see. Another thing that I saw on social media and through anecdotes and friends was whether you were on an aeroplane or a train recently, or in a local coffee shop, if you wanted to use your own reusable cup in recent weeks, you're not able to because it's a coronavirus risk. And I think, safety is absolutely crucial, and we're in a bit of an unusual circumstance. So I can completely understand why those businesses took that decision in the short term, but this shouldn't be a reason to go back on a lot of hard work that's been made in recent years when it comes to single-use plastic and looking at all alternatives. There are smart ways around it where we could sanitize reusable cups, and we could think of other solutions. It's all about making the responsible choice. And as things come back to normal, I'm seeing us returning back to a reduction in the use of single-use plastics. Another thing I'd say is, for all the positive creative responses and the community responses to COVID-19, there are some more unscrupulous elements within the business community who are willing to use that fear to push their own agendas. I think for all that community stuff, sometimes there's some kind of selfish thinking and corporate selfish thinking. And if I look at what's happening in the US and kind of who is choosing to lobby and fight back against coronavirus, who is using coronavirus as I was just saying before, or using to market and use the fear to their advantage. I think if you look, you look in the light of day and you look at the facts and you look at the other options that are available, it's a bit of a selfish choice by those people, and it's a very self-interested choice. And I don't think it's very veiled either. I think it's pretty clear to see. So I think, I can understand people's concerns. I know people's concerns, but I think there is the innovation. There is that bigger picture once we emerge from coronavirus to choose better. And to be honest, if I take it, I'm not a biochemist, but the reality is that whatever surface you have, whether it's a natural surface or a plastic surface, you're looking at this particular virus at the moment being there for a set amount of time. And what you're really looking at is how do you balance safety of people and for the consumption of food alongside looking after the planet in the long term and choosing the responsible choice for the material going forward. So I think it's an interesting one to watch, but it's not changing my view on the fact that we need to be using less single-use plastic.
And just thinking forward, then, you've talked a lot about kind of this sort of almost post, I guess I'd call it a post-lockdown world, because I suppose it won't be post-coronavirus world for a long time. But what are your kind of top priorities and hopes for the remainder of 2020, 2021 from a sustainable business perspective there at Interface?
For us, I think one thing I'm looking at is the ability to use this time to make sure that we can continue on our mission, which is called Climate Take Back, and to demonstrate ways that you can create a climate fit for life. So nothing changes in terms of our products, our communications, and so forth. I guess what I'm hoping for is the opportunity to get back to sharing that in a business as usual way. But until then, we will look to see how we can connect. And at the moment, I think people really can benefit from a little bit of climate optimism, some stories of positivity. And I think some of the great innovations that are out there by lots of different kind of companies can help that. So if you time it right and you're giving people that little dose of inspiration, or you're sharing the lessons you've learned, I think that can be very helpful.
Well, that leads me nicely on to my next point, because I was going to ask for your dose of inspiration and your lessons that you might have learned over the last few weeks as to your sort of tips, advice for fellow susty professionals out there who are perhaps working at home, perhaps getting very frustrated by the lack of connectivity, or those, there's a lot of people in our audience on furlough at the moment, and they're trying to keep themselves connected. Do you have any tips, advice, kind of working from home wise, recommendations for things? I would ask you to show us what's on your bookshelf there, but hopefully they can come up.
We can start with the books. I think it's a good opportunity to catch up on some sustainability reading. I will do a kind of turnaround show and tell now. One of the newest ones out is Christina Figueres, who was a key driver in the Paris Change talks alongside Tom Rivett-Carnac, who has produced the Future We Choose. Mm-hmm. And it's a great kind of look at, in a positive way, the situation we find ourselves in now in terms of climate, but where we need to be. I mean, it's very much timed for COP26, which will now take place in 2021. But it also highlights the fact that we can make a difference. We're at a decision-making point. On a similar line to this, I don't have it here, but John Elkington has recently released a book called Green Swans, which again is thinking about a different kind of shift. So this is a good time to think about kind of a bit of sustainability reading. I also recommend the audio books, because it's always nice to hear the guys telling you the stuff and hearing their voice. Maybe that's a personal thing, but that's also another bit of advice. So that's another one to look at there. In terms of other things, I think you've got to look after your own well-being, and if you're self-isolating, probably your own sanity. So maybe trying a few new things within the sustainability world. There's a few people doing some great stuff. You can check out Mark Shaler, who's a great sustainability professional for many, many years, is teaching Qigong, I think 8 a.m. every morning. So you can give that a whirl, bit of wellness and mind being. Equally, through the Sustainability Network, I have a friend who helps out kind of homeless choirs called James Sills, and he started a thing called the Sofa Singers. So he's getting everyone kind of singing along, and it's a little different from what you normally do, but he's trying to connect different communities. So always a chance to try a random hobby. I recommend trying something a little bit different. So those would be my tips, but just make sure you're giving time to look after yourself. When you work at home, the tendency is that you don't want to stop. You end up working longer. You end up kind of overbalancing a little bit, and kind of in terms of trying to make sure you've done enough. And you just got to be wary of that. You've got to make sure there's enough time for you to stop. These are stressful times as well. Everyone's anxious, and you need to find a way to release that and find that balance.
Well, I knew you'd have a good answer to that, so thank you. There's some really good recommendations there. And at risk of keeping us past our usual working hours, I did promise I'll keep these chats to kind of 15-20 minutes, so I think I'll bring us to a stop there. But thank you so much for being our first guest on this new series, Jon. I know how manic things still are for everyone at the moment, so I appreciate you stepping up at the short notice. So it is worth noting to everyone that we've recorded this interview on the afternoon of it's Wednesday, isn't it? You always forget what day it is. It's Wednesday, the 8th of April. We'll be publishing it in full on edie on Thursday, the 9th. So see you all again soon for our next episode of Susty Talk. And I can promise you we have some big names, really big names lined up for the next few episodes. So do stay tuned for those. But in the meantime, stay safe, stay positive, and keep up the Susty Talk. Thank you. Goodbye.